Hi guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Security Space podcast. As many of you might have already clocked, we have a returning guest, Mr. Lee Howard. So thank you very much for coming back on the Security Space. How are you, Lee?
Very good, thank you for having me.
Good.
After a 2-year hiatus.
2-year hiatus, absolutely. And Lee, you're obviously in a new position now. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course, yeah. So I've just recently stepped into Evri, so the parcel and logistics company. So I'm now the effectively CISO, head of information security risk, and data protection officer there as well. So interesting business, quite a fast-paced environment. Very critical and high-paced sector. So moving from previous role at View in the cinemas and movies, and now I'm in logistics and delivery.
Absolutely, and that pretty much segues to what we will be speaking about today. So basically what me and Lee will be discussing today is all about how security actually impacts the delivery and logistics sector. So I kind of been chomping at the bit to jump at a very topical sort of issue that has happened in 2025 with the likes of JLR, Harrods, M&S, Co-op, and a lot of the reason for it is supply chains has been a major cause of attacks this year. Mm-hmm. Now, in your role at Evri, obviously we were chatting about it without the camera being on, and it's so intertwined, isn't it, with the delivery and logistics sector now. Gone are the days of just a simple postman going from A to B. It's not like that anymore, is it? It's like it's an interconnected world now between digital and physical security. So talk to me, explain a little bit to me and the audience, supply chain risks of the delivery and logistics sector then, buddy.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So we cover a lot of bases at Evri. So we'll facilitate B2B deliveries, for example. We'll facilitate business to customers, so anyone who does online retail shopping, for example. And we also facilitate now customer to customer, so people send in letters and parcels that you probably would have typically done through Royal Mail, for example, back in the day. So we've got different dynamics and different flavors and different risks associated with each one of those sort of journeys. And then if you get under the hood of that as well, there's different customer experiences that people expect now with deliveries. So we have obviously the last mile where someone will come to your door and deliver to you. There's obviously different risks associated with that. From in my world, you think about how many photographs we probably process, all those photographs of us stood at the door in our slippers, for example, things like that, to all the way through to leaving parcels or letters in out of home experiences. So if anyone's used a locker service before, or may have gone to a shop where you can collect it from one of our sort of out-of-home depots, for example. So the landscape is quite. It's not as straightforward as you would think from the A to B sort of delivery of a letter or a parcel. So that comes with its own nuances. And then I think it's a growing sector as well. People's shopping habits are changing and have changed since COVID. So we're seeing an increase in volume as well. So trying to I suppose manage that throughput. There's classic PII of names, addresses, things like that have to be handled as part of this process. And then to your point as well, through the supply chain. So we'll have various big clients of ours that are looking into us as a critical component of their operation. And obviously cyber resilience is a very topical subject at the minute. So again, I get the sense that there is more of a I sort of look left and right between businesses across everyone's supply chain, really, to provide that level of assurance that the cybersecurity posture is where it needs to be, and they are not going to be a single point of failure for a critical component of their operation, effectively. So we're feeling that as a business, because we are the web, we are the network that sort of interconnects everything from that digital experience through to that real world experience. But then clearly we've got partners in our supply chain as well that facilitate in our operation. And again, we're looking down and across at them as well. So really interesting at the minute. There is a lot of talk about this. I think listeners and yourself might have seen in the news last week. I think it was the NCSC issued out the letter to FTSE 350 chairs, which is really pointing now is a real focus at pivoting into more cyber resilience as opposed to cyber defense. So we've all been very focused on securing the perimeter or trying to create these zero trust networks, for example. But now it's about it's not the if, it's the when. So then, how resilient can we be from an operational perspective in the event of a crisis? So we, again, like everyone else, we're sort of looking at that now from a supply chain perspective to provide assurances to ourselves and our clients.
Yeah, and that's it, isn't it? In the sense of it's probably the right mindset to have, in the sense of like security now, I believe, is very well received in boardrooms as opposed to a few years ago, or it's definitely getting better. I don't think it's like, and how do you influence the boardroom? I think there's been enough high-profile incidents where it's like, we've got to take this seriously. But obviously, as we've learnt this year, it's like the attacks, and I say this a little bit as a sweeping statement, they've been quite not the most sophisticated of attacks, isn't it? A lot of it has been through A, supply chains, but B, it's like been socially engineered. So therefore, yes, whilst we can put all these amazing sort of tools in place, and we can build these amazing postures, and we can build cloud security, identity, threat intelligence, whatever it might be, it's like, say, the resilience is getting a little bit more of the focus at this moment in time. But to circle back round, I kind of wanted to just ask you, like, the blend between physical risk and digital risk is becoming more and more blurred, and where I'm coming to is the fact that are you responsible for the amount of information, intellectual property and digital property that's going along daily in these courier trucks and all these deliveries, that it's not simply an email as to what you might have had at view and all this digital security, it is now physical property as well. Does that fall under your remit, Lee?
Yeah, so we have, we work closely with, so we have a big operational footprint, as you can imagine. So, our head office operation, for example, is minuscule in comparison to our logistics operation, right? So we have to have a hand-in-glove approach with our operational leads and our operational teams.
Yeah.
I think when you're looking at this from a risk management perspective, however, there's different, there's different approaches to this, and I've seen various, this gets back to data ownership. So from data controllers or data processors, are we a processor of an individual's data because we're facilitating an A to B transaction, and therefore, even though it's in the physical sense in a truck, it's still transient data, right? Or are we a data controller, to your point, because we're the custodians of that information for a period of time? We think about the digital landscape in a network. A signal can go from A to B in a millisecond, whereas a parcel can go from A to B in 10 days, for example, right? The principle is still the same, though. It's just the longevity of the custodianship is slightly different. So there is, from an ICO perspective, there's no actual, right or wrong answers. It is just purely being able to demonstrate your competencies and controls about the subject's data and how you are handling that in determination of, are you a processor of the information or are you a controller of the information?
It's fluid then, is it? Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
It's fluid in the sense of the determinating how you see yourself, right, as a business, but then that relationship has to be established with all your clients and all your customers and reflected in privacy notices, contractual terms and arrangements, things like that. But the point I'm making is that if you are a processor of someone's information, you would have to handle that ever so slightly differently from a relationship perspective and demonstrate those controls. And if you're the controller of someone's information, again, that's slightly more nuanced, but the point is that a regulator would be looking for an establishment of what that relationship is, and can you demonstrate the competencies in the controls. I won't get into the technicalities of one versus the other, because there's advantages and disadvantages with both, like economy of scale, for example. If you've ever dealt with say a conglomerate, they would probably prefer to just, these are our terms, we are the controller, like it or lump it. Whereas a processor would have to facilitate the requirements of all the data controllers and those client relationships. So maybe a little bit more overhead and a little bit more flexibility, for example. So it's interesting, but like I say, the digital world and the physical world, the principles still apply. It's just instead of being that microsecond, it could be 10 days, for example.
Which is a massive increase, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And as you are the custodian of that information, the risk kind of sits with you, doesn't it? Right?
Yeah. No, it's interesting. And another potential challenge that I wanted to pick your brain on is basically fraudulent and brand impersonation. I myself, in the past, I think it's quite a common sort of a attack surface for the delivery and logistics sector. I've definitely had it with like you say Royal Mail. I might have even had it with Evri in recent years, where it's like, oh, your parcel is ready to collect, pay £1.95 to whatever it might be. And I don't buy a lot of online stuff, and if I do, I get it through my missus's. She shops all over, so I'm like, can you get that? I'll send you money. So I'm like, that's a bit dodgy. So, and then lo and behold, it is dodgy. So, is brand impersonation quite a big one with the likes of yourselves?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, so we especially so we have peaks and troughs with this, so it is a problem, and we'll start to see that ramp up now leading into peak. So as we get into the Black Friday deals and Cyber Weekend and Christmas and things like that, obviously retailers start to ramp up, and therefore we reciprocate that and we begin to ramp up as well. And then when there's a higher volume and throughput, then the fraudsters start to kick into gear as well. So we're seeing that right now. And like I say, it'll be a peak through what we call peak trading, which is the 3-month quarter that'll start in about a month's time, right through to the New Year sales. So we have various mechanisms to try and mitigate that risk from a brand impersonation perspective as much as possible. And then we also have, I think, like awareness campaigns that we're running nationally as well. So, for example, we've got a press office that I work really closely with. We've already had some, visibility in national newspapers and online and things like that about raising the awareness with individuals around fraud scams involving like text messages, like you said. It's normally the text messages that so again, it's that alignment with national press to get the information out there to say, be aware, this is how fraudsters operate. So that's like training, awareness, education. And then also trying to work with telco providers as well, right? So, this is a serious organized crime. They're using the telecom networks to propagate SMSs to individuals. So how do we work more closely with them as well during these the peak periods of fraud, basically? So again, it is quite complicated because we've got a responsibility to protect our customers and our brand as much as possible, but it's huge. We just for context, we've just a few weeks ago delivered our 1 billionth parcel this year. You think about those numbers, like, it is a huge scale operation to try and manage and maintain.
Oh, that's it. And it's like, it just, even from the last sort of 10-15 minutes that we've been chatting, it just seems like the attack surface is absolutely phenomenal when it comes to the likes of Evri. Just like you say, there's every single transaction is a possible attack surface where basically a threat actor can actually use to gain somewhat of an entry. Like you say, a billion transactions just in itself, but that's only scratching the surface. Like you say, there's the whole supply chain is just an interconnected web. So even like someone could come in via ASOS and get into Evri from there or whatever it might be. So it just seems like a huge project. And we were chatting off air, and you say that, like, look, Evri's business is going tremendously well, and you're actually going to be sort of like getting bigger and larger. So I suppose my next question, Lee, is not necessarily purely focused on Evri, but like, how do you actually come into an organisation that is already a decent size and is actually growing? Because you made a great terminology, like what is right now might not be right in coming months. So you as a CISO, how do you actually sort of plan your strategy in the short, medium, and long term for knowing that that's the plan?
Don't know yet, Michael. So I've only been there 6-7 weeks, and every strategy is going to be different to every business. But I want to add two things on this. So going back to your last point around the logistics and sort of that attack surface area, I think that's actually a problem that affects every business in every sector, because product systems and services are digitalizing. effectively, that means that the attack surface area for cyber is growing. So therefore, the likelihood of something happening in the future is going to increase no matter what the business model is, right? Like you said, because everybody and everything is digitalizing. So that's a problem that everybody faces. And then the other component to this is the proliferation and sophistication of the attacks. You know, so we've seen an increase in attacks and sophistication mainly through AI propagation. So businesses are using AI and automation to speed things up and create some efficiencies. So are the cyber criminals.
Yes.
So you've got this like two exponential curves coming together here. Bigger attack surface area because all the businesses, systems, products and services are digitalizing, and then the threat landscape is just becoming increasingly more hostile because of advancements in AI and the sophistication and the weaponization of those tools. So that's that problem.
Yes.
Right. And then remind me again, sorry, what was the question?
Next one is just all around your strategy, like I say, Evri's going.
Yeah. So that is the baseline basically for what I was just about to describe. So what I said, exactly that. What we did yesterday is not necessarily what we need to be doing tomorrow.
Yes.
Right. So we're expanding. So therefore, the brand will get bigger, the target will get larger, and everything that I've just explained earlier on. So I think what you tend to find with more mature organizations like mine is that we need to take a little bit more of a thematic view on our risks around.
Thematic, what does that mean?
So it's basically like a heat map, right? So,
all right, okay.
So what I would not look at the, if you go into the board with a one pager, because they always want a one pager.
Yeah. Make it simple for me.
Yeah, make it simple. Okay, this is our sort of risk score, right? Fine. But in reality, we need to look at the operating environment of the business. So like most businesses, you're broken down into like classic IT infrastructure. E-commerce will probably have some, cloud and digital footprint and web application and mobile application, for example. And then the likes of logistics firms, we've got a big OT environment as well, right? So all of those components go together to make one business. But if I was going to overlay a risk framework or a risk assessment for cybersecurity, I would get probably red, amber, green scores, right? Because for the different variables within the business environments.
Yes.
So therefore, then you have to take so it allows you then to take a more prescriptive view on the risk, and then start to formulate a bit of a strategic plan going forward. So it's exactly that. So if I look at my OT environment, if my OT environment is like super secure and really hardened and employ lots of good controls over the last 5-10 years, fantastic. How much effort do I need to apply to that? Whereas if I switch fire to the digital environment, for example, are we still seeing the level of maturity that we expect there as well? So again, when I say thematic, like I said, it's more of a heat map.
Yes.
Because I may expect stronger controls in my operational environment in OT than potentially in digital or IT, for example, and vice versa. So again, I think we have tried to wrap our arms around the CISOs over the last few years and just take a single view on our position and then a single view on that threat landscape. But I think we need to take a more detailed view on our operational dependencies within the business environment. And then that lends itself to what I said earlier about building in resilience.
Yes.
So we can't. It is difficult for the businesses have budgets, right? So they don't have a bottomless pit of cash, and it's a case of where can we, where are our high impact areas or more sensitive sort of systems and operations, and how can we bake in that resilience so if the worst was to happen, we still remain operational whilst dealing with the firefight. So I think that's the challenge for CISOs moving forward now is how do they bake in that resilience to the more critical components of the business environment, and it's breaking it out from IT as well. It's always been around mainly the IT environments, but as the unfortunate incident with JLR, for example, has exposed, it's fundamentally not just within the IT environment, it's within other business environments as well.
Yeah, I think I've read actually this morning, has it been the most costly cyber breach in the UK or something like that? I think just because the operating costs are shutting down, the actual remediation.
Yeah, and there's the other thing to consider with businesses, there's a ramp rate to this as well. There's going to be even if they fix all their problems, today, or I know they went into production maybe a week or so ago.
Yeah.
That ain't going to go to 100% production straight
No.
away. There's going to be like a ramp rate to that as well. So you've got this immediate outage effect, and then you've got this sort of elongated return to normalization effect as well, which is challenging. It's difficult to quantify that as well.
Yeah, not to mention obviously the brand taking a hit as well. Do you know what I mean? 'Cause
Yeah.
it's been so high profile, but just with the time of it, and B, the high profile nature of it. But like, look, this isn't a sledging conversation on JLR. Obviously, I know that they've got enough sort of conversations happened about them.
But
this year,
it's that, just what you mentioned there, that's an interesting point as well, because I do feel like with Co-op, M&S and JLR, there's been a lot of empathy towards the situation, to be fair. Would people have the same empathy if this was happening in financial services, for example, and to a bank? Probably not. I don't know. But yeah, I think that's been quite an interesting dynamic through all of this, is that there doesn't seem to be there seems to be an understanding and appreciation, but I think how long would that sustain if this kept happening to big businesses before the public and the consumer begin to get fed up?
Interesting point, that. I didn't even think about that, because like you say, a bank would not get given the same grace, would they? That's an interesting point, that. I just wanted to bring it back just a few minutes ago, just when you were sort of balancing the risk between OT and IT, and what you said just previous to that point around obviously the increase of AI has obviously increased the sharpness of the tools and the attacks. It's kind of like, yeah, cool, we've got all this AI, but it's also just matured the attacker's threat as well. So it's not really like it's been an advantage, it's just accelerated cybersecurity incidents in line with the demand. But what you were saying there about OT just pricked my ears up a little bit. Like, does AI actually have a massive effect on the OT side and on the physical side? Is it quite separate? So, like, you said that, like, our OT environment, it can be pretty secure. I've had a look at it. It's quite resilient. Is it in a world that is separate to AI, where it's like, it doesn't really impact too much? So, like, I can kind of just keep that there, and it's like that'll be all right for the time being, whereas my digital stuff, my world, it's like it's on fire at the moment, and I need to be constantly aware of it daily. Or have I missed the mark there?
No, I think and this is not just applicable to Evri, this is just from what I see when I see the differentiators between digital environments, IT environments, and OT environments. So you tend to find like IT is pretty much well versed in security requirements. Okay, not perfect, but it's normally in bed and in the same team as the information security officer, right? Digital slightly different, because it's an ever evolving, ever changing landscape. New products and services and applications and things are constantly getting renewed and developed, so therefore it's not static. IT is a little bit more static than the digital environment, so that presents itself a different type of risk and a different dynamic. And then if you go to OT, for example, OT is very static. You'll have systems in place that have been there decades in some instances, and its resilience is normally born out of separation and segmentation. Basically make it a private network, air gap it from the world, and it just turns and burns. The reality is that as we, getting back to my previous point, digitalize, there's more and more integration now and overlap between IT and digital requirements in the OT space. So again, you're seeing something where a playbook that's been used for many years to just air gap it and it'll be okay is not going to be functional in the next 10 years. And similarly with the digital environment that is quite dynamic, although it exposes itself to more risk, is probably more recoverable and could probably spin back up quicker in the event of an emergency. An OT environment with physical systems, not so much. So you have to have that sort of intrinsic understanding of the different variables of those environments, and then the applicability of a risk framework to them. So that's why, again, I get back to my point earlier. It's almost impossible just to take a silver bullet view on. This is our score from a maturity perspective. Well, actually, it's probably going to be very different in its applicability in OT to digital.
Really interesting point. And no, it's been really interesting. I've only got one last question for you, Lee, and it's a fun one. It's around GRC, and it's just what you were saying a few minutes ago around the supply chain. I just can't seem to shift it in my brain in the sense of it's so interconnected with all these different businesses, and it was about around sort of the data ownership. And it's like, okay, what sort of certifications does Evri need to hold in order to be sort of like, yeah, legislative and need to demonstrate to the ICO? Because like you say, when you say in like, yeah, it's a fluidity, and it's all about, well, it depends on who owns the data at what point in that 10-day SLA. And it's like, well, to the ICO, I bet that's a massive risk. 'Cause it's like, well, everybody likes things to be simple, but it sounds like there's so many different variables, and governing bodies like the ICO must like that. They must like, this is black and white, and you are the ownership there. The risk lies with you there. Okay, you are now free of any ownership there. So, like, what sort of GRC standards do you need to hold, and what sort of certifications does Evri need to present?
Yeah, so I think there's a DP and a cyber element to this. So when describing fluidity, like, we're pretty consistent in our operating model. Like, we typically would be the data processor in this instance with our clients and our customers, and that's how our entire operating model around data protection is then sort of how it manifests itself. And then what we're able to do then is clearly demonstrate competencies and controls aligned to that type of operating model. If we had a different relationship and we insisted we was a data controller with our customers and our clients, then we would reconfigure that, and we would have a different operating model that would reflect the requirements of that relationship. So there's only it is black and white. There's only really two variables you can have. There are some grey areas when you may have a controller and controller relationship, for example, but that's not atypical, right?
Okay.
So we're geared around being a processor of individuals' information, and then when it comes to the accreditation, again, this is all dependent and driven from your client base again. So if we are working with retailers, for example, they will want to see good information security standards and assurance, but they may not necessarily want to see the same level of, say, certification if we had a contract with a Crown representative or a governmental department, or if we were engaging with pensions, banks, insurances, things like that, who may have, you know, sensitive letters and sensitive information. You receive your pension documents, or you may receive a driving license from the DVLA or whatever. That comes with different levels of requirements. So again, our level of assurance will be reflected based on our client portfolio and what our clients are demanding, and then you would typically then raise all the boats to that standard. But that's where it's interesting, because if you have one client out of thousands who has this really, really, you know, this thing that you've got from a business perspective, is like, is that something that we want to, from a governance perspective, is that something we want to maintain for that one client? You know, obviously that's not the situation in our case, but it just goes to show, like, where you would position yourself in the market and who your customers are that you're trying to serve and facilitate. It can be slightly different sometimes, depending on the sensitivity information that you're couriering.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, Lee, I just want to wish you good luck in the new role.
Thank
Obviously,
you.
with Evri, I think they've got an absolute gem on their hands, and I think you'll build absolute amazing posture there. I can't wait to see you grow into the role. But other than that, if anybody's got any questions for Lee today that we've raised, I'll be sure to put his information down below. But once again, buddy, thanks for coming back on the Security Space podcast.
Thank you very much, Nick.
Cheers.